I don't know, so I don't want to get too into the mechanical details of how that even works. But Mike has said over and over again that he wants to coach the Steelers, and that's what he wants to do.
You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a Tuckheads Tuesday, which means it's January, it's for you, and we've got Jim Rooney, part of the Rooney family, who has an awesome book. A lot of things I want to talk to him about the Steelers in general, his father, Dan Rooney in particular. Should be fun. We are presented, of course, by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Also, some gigantic news as it relates to the Chicago Bears. And it is a new week still, so make sure you're thinking about being the Spread the Word winner at Ross Tucker Pod, at Ross Tucker NFL, taking advantage of any of our sponsors, and then emailing it to me, ross@rosstucker.com, or the YouTube shout-out, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. It is Big Show time with Jim Rooney, presented by Labatt Blue Light. Drink some Labatt Blue Lights like the Bills fans will be this weekend. Live life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York.
The Big Show.
So excited for today's guest. Been looking forward to this really the last couple of days since I first heard about the opportunity to bring him on. There's a million things I have to ask him because Pittsburgh and the Steelers and all that. I'm talking about Jim Rooney, who has an awesome book that came out recently about his dad. It's called A Different Way to Win, Dan Rooney's story from the Super Bowl to the Rooney Rule. Now available, by the way, for the first time on audio, which, Jim, is huge. I was telling you before we started the interview, my wife has a family propane business here in Central PA. It's about an hour north, so that's her commute. All she does is books on tape. That's all she does, right? So if I tell her about this, she'll probably listen to it. She says she reads the book when she listens. I think that counts. But I love that you have it on audio now. That's huge, man. How are you?
I'm doing great, Ross. It's good to see you and good to be here. And yeah, the audio is really cool because what we did is I read the chapters of the book, which we really enjoyed, and I had a lot of help with the book. Judy Batista from NFL Network and Jeremy Duru, who's a law professor down in America and one of the leaders of the Rooney Rule movement or the Fritz Pollard Alliance. So really enjoyed putting the book together. But in the audio, I have interviews with Franco. I have interviews with Rocky. I have interviews with Commissioner Goodell, Commissioner Tagliabue. Joe Green does the foreword. And then at the beginning and the end, I have Bill Cowher read the intro, and the sort of final piece is an interview with Mike Tomlin. So some great reads from some NFL notables in the book. So I think folks would really enjoy those interviews.
That is awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Big fan of your dad and the family. And I'll tell you one of the things I love about you guys the most. And I grew up, closer to Philly as an Eagles fan, right?
Yep.
But I love, Jim, high school football, right? Like for years, I did the state championship games down the road for way less than I normally get paid. Because my wife said, you're just going to be watching them on TV anyway. You might as well drive to Hershey Park and call the games. But a lot of people might not know this. I don't know how many NFL teams still do this. But the Steelers, they have all the WPIAL championship games. That's District 7 in Western PA. They have all of them at Acrisure Stadium. And it is the dream for all of those kids. The goal, it used to be Heinz Field, now Acrisure Stadium. The goal is to play there. And I know there's probably been times when you guys got criticized or the field conditions or whatever, but man, that warms my heart, Jim, that you give those kids that opportunity. I know that's something that's always been important to the family.
Well, it's funny when some of these great players, Gronk played there, because his last season was at Woodland Hills, Ty Law, some of these kids that went to Aliquippa, they were there all the time. And when you talk to those kids, I think when Danny Marino was there, I think they didn't play his senior year at Three Rivers. I think they played for some reason there was a scheduling conflict, but so many greats when they get back with their buddies, every time they tell me these stories, they're like, "We just won a Super Bowl," and they'll all talk about being at the Whipple Championship at Heinz Field rather than a Super Bowl championship this player might have just won. So there's nothing better than high school football. Friday night in the fall is one of the greatest nights in America. And I have a buddy whose son is a big time recruit. He's a quarterback at Mount Lebanon, which is a 6A team. So, I'm back, now with a real rooting interest, so it's always fun when you're really pulling for someone.
That is awesome. And I think my alma mater is Princeton, and we got like 3 or 4 Whippeal kids this year that are supposed to be really good. A couple from Upper St. Clair, maybe in
Yep.
North Allegheny. Like we really did well recruiting some Whippeal kids this year, which is awesome. Just some questions before we get back into the book, because I do want to talk about the book. Some things that jumped up to me. What was it like growing up in Pittsburgh with the last name Rooney? What was that like?
At the end of the day, it was amazing. The people of Pittsburgh are just so kind and generous. Ross, Reading, although you're close to Philly, when you're outside of the big city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, all across the Midwest, we're industrial towns and people work really hard and football is important to them, whether it's Friday night, Saturday, or, hopefully Sunday. And I hope they appreciate that we've tried to run our team like they live their lives and run their businesses. That's sort of the goal is that we reflect what this town is like, and the people have been so generous to me and to all of us. I couldn't say more. Every once in a while, I wish they wouldn't tell me who should be the starting quarterback, but I'll take that with the rest of the good.
That is awesome. So you have 8 siblings. So I guess I was always curious. My wife has this family business, right? She's, depending on how you define it, third or fourth generation.
Right.
You have 8 siblings. Talk to me about the family dynamic and how it was decided who has what roles within the Steelers versus maybe any of the other business interests. You have a really cool and interesting background with some of the things you've done outside of football. How did that family dynamic unfold? What was like sort of the expectations there?
Yeah, for better or worse, we've had sort of an oldest son role, and I know that gets criticized these days, but that's sort of been how it's been for 4 generations. And my father was my grandfather who founded the team's oldest. My brother Art, who's now the president, was the oldest. And I think in that role, there was always that expectation, and there was coaching and support, but there was also a high demand. I mean, there's days I wish I had my brother's job, but there's plenty of days when my father was tougher on my brother than any of the rest of us because you knew what the expectation was. So I think that goes with it. In terms of my situation, I joke they sent me on one scouting trip to Slippery Rock, the Rock, which is a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
clearly they didn't send me to Alabama or Ohio State, so they didn't think my talents were too good, and they never sent me out on scouting again. So most of the time when I'm working for the team and was doing things for my father, it was in sort of the public relations or public engagement space, and that's part of the football now is there's important relationships. So dealing with that has been fun, but I always love those that get to deal with the football side. But they also say everyone thinks it's all fun, but it's not.
So refresh my memory on the timeline. Was the Rooney Rule created before the Steelers hired Mike Tomlin, or did the Steelers hire Mike Tomlin and then maybe the success that Mike had or whatever, did that start to prompt conversation about the Rooney Rule? I really don't remember.
No, if you look, so historically, the where I talk about the big change is back in '68. My father had said he wanted us to be a more highly integrated team, and this was the time when you had less minority players, particularly less black players, having opportunities in the NFL. And we bring in a scout, a gentleman named Bill Nunn, who was the third African-American scout in NFL history. And from 68 to 80, the Steelers draft more players from the HBCUs than any other team in the NFL. And you know that team goes on to win. You have guys who weren't even being recruited, like Joe Green, John Stallworth, Donnie Shell, Mel Blount. All those guys come in and weren't being scouted in many ways from a whole lot of other teams. So it changes the course of the team in that time. Now he went to Minnesota, but this guy named Tony Dungy comes in, and he's an okay football player, but Coach Knoll sees how great he could be at a coach. Becomes our defensive coordinator, the youngest person to ever be named defense coordinator, was 29. And then it's that history, him not getting the interviews, that I think really was the thing that showed my father, like there really is a lack of opportunity at the coaching level, and we need to do something. So that happened, at the end of the day, the rule was brought about 6 years before we hired Mike, but the process of really observing Tony's career and being a mentor and an advocate for Tony, I think is really what drove what Tony calls the spirit of the Rooney Rule.
I never knew that. That is awesome. That's a great story. And then really, Tomlin was a terrific example, right? Because, there were other people. I can't remember if it was like Russ Grimm or Wisenhunt, but there was sort of, people thought that there was going to be like an internal promotion from one of Bill Cowher's guys, but you went through the process, you interviewed people, and obviously now that we all know what he's like, I'm not surprised at all that Mike Tomlin was impressive in interview, and that's really kind of how he got hired, right?
Well, and absolutely, and so Russ was a great candidate. Wiz was a great candidate. The fourth candidate, the fourth finalist, was Coach Rivera, who went on to be, I think, a great head coach. Did a lot of good things. I think the Commanders are doing fantastic, but you also see his fingerprints on some of the success they're having. Great coach, and he was the actual Rooney Rule candidate. He was the first minority that was in that process. So we technically didn't even have to talk to Mike, and it was actually Tony and a guy named John Wooten who suggested to my father that, look, there's this young guy out there named Mike Tomlin. You've had this history with Bill Cowher and with Chuck Noll of getting guys that most people weren't quite on other people's radar, maybe a year or two before everyone else. And so that's the process that was followed.
Wow, that is awesome. Do you think, I guess I'm curious your opinion. It feels like there are teams that will interview minority candidates that no other team is hiring. And the perception, I don't know if it's reality, but the perception is they're really only interviewing them to satisfy the Rooney Rule. Curious, just Jim, to get your thoughts on that dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that's happening. You can never know what's going on in someone's mind if you're not there, but it definitely seems like that's happened on several occasions. My friend Ryan Clark, who was a great Steeler, is saying we should get rid of the Rooney Rule because it does create this humiliation that you're forcing folks to go through an effort that there's no genuine interest in them. It's funny, I have many of the same arguments that Ryan makes, but to me, the conclusion is we should absolutely have it. I'm not saying we should be embarrassing owners, but we should create visibility, and it should be clear that, look, interviews should be genuine. We should be seeking out opportunities for everyone. And in doing that, we should go further with groups that traditionally have been getting less opportunities. But that's also why the rule, and why my father, where I think some of his insight was, it has nothing to do with the decision-making mode. It has to do with the interview mode. And he believed that if you were genuinely open and carried process, and my father was pretty good at hiring coaches, he hired three in almost 60 years. But if you took your time and really tried to go through a broad swath of candidates and really tried to give each of them a chance, you would come up with a good candidate. So why not have intervention at that level and have inclusion of folks at that level. It's not forcing you to make a decision, but it is forcing you to talk to people. And to me, it makes no sense to have someone and not genuinely consider them. But I can't say that based on a whole bunch of experiences that a lot of people have felt that they have had sham interviews. That I think that's horrible, and I agree with Ryan that it's humiliating. But I also, to me, it's an argument to continue to do this and find ways to be more transparent and more earnest in that process.
It's interesting, Jim, living where I do, I know a lot of Steelers fans. And what's so interesting is there is a little bit of a dynamic there between the national perception of Mike Tomlin right now and Steelers fans, right? Like nationally, everybody thinks he's a great coach and we see what he's done and the consistency and all that. Steelers fans, though, they're used to a lot of success, right? The 70s, that you think about Roethlisberger, and you haven't been able to have that postseason success. It is an interesting, I mean, I'm sure you hear it all the time. I don't know if there's a greater dichotomy between how local fans are, maybe that's some other markets too, versus the national perception. What do you think about Steelers fans that are kind of frustrated with the lack of postseason success under Mike?
Well,
Recent postseason success.
I think it's an organization issue, not just Mike. I think all of us are responsible for the outcomes, and I think we take responsibility. I don't want to get into excuse making, but the reality is we outperform the NFL mean at a greater rate than just about any team for the last 25 years. Another team that has been in that category in terms of outperforming that mean has been the Ravens. There's no other team that in either case that have been as successful and has a division rival that has outperformed the mean. So, when you look at the challenges we face, I think if this was a boxing match and you were judging, the competition, not just looking at the winning percentage, you would have to say that we have performed in a harder circumstance than most, and we've outperformed them. Having said that, I understand no one wants to lose playoff games. The goal is to win the Super Bowl, and you have to get to there, which we do. You have to get to playoffs, which we do well, and you have to win playoff games, which we haven't. So, the other excuse I'll make there, though, also let's throw this in is, look, the guys that we've lost some bad playoff games, but we also lost to three guys that have some pretty, unique names: Manning, Brady, and Mahomes. Like that's the playoff route we have to go to get to those wins. So again, I don't want to be making any excuses, but I also think if you're going to make an argument, you should look at the facts in the matter. And I think the Steelers organization, Mike Tomlin, have outperformed any expectation you could have of any NFL team in terms of who they have to play against, what the competition looks like, et cetera.
Well, and what's interesting to me about that, Jim, is you guys won Super Bowls, obviously, when you had guys like Bradshaw and Roethlisberger, and you haven't had a guy like that, the last few years, and you're going against Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, and you mentioned Mahomes, like MVP candidates. And the thing I think is interesting is everybody wants the Steelers to have a top 10 quarterback or an elite quarterback. Like nobody has a great solution.
Right.
For how to get that guy.
No one wants to lose 2 years in a row.
It's not like you just get one at the store. Like, and I think it's really impressive how many games you guys have won without having that. But it really is a tough problem to solve right now for you guys, Jim.
And no one in Pittsburgh, if you said, now they might say, oh, I'm okay with it. But I mean, Ross, they'll burn the city down if we go 3-13 for, 3 years in a row. But that's generally how you get one of those top guys. I mean, occasionally you get lucky and occasionally you make the right trade decision, but there's more examples of not getting lucky and not making the right trade. Again, I don't want to be making excuses, but it's an interesting dilemma. And again, I would rather have Art and Mike and Omar, the guys in charge, trying to solve it than the opposite.
So there was a report over the weekend which I thought was really interesting, that the Bears had called the Steelers, called you guys to try to trade for Mike Tomlin. That doesn't happen very often. And I guess I respect the Bears. You can never hurt if you don't make the call. I like the due diligence. Let's put it that way. Just kind of your thoughts on even the idea of a team trading for Mike Tomlin.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think that's realistic. I don't know, so I don't want to get too into the mechanical details of how that even works. But Mike has said over and over again that he wants to coach the Steelers, and that's what he wants to do. I don't think there's any real interest in that happening. It's intriguing in the world we live in. We we need dialogue and content all the time, but I just don't think that's probably a realistic action.
Last question, Jim. Sell me and all my listeners and people watching on YouTube on why we should buy the book. Like what's the pitch for the book?
Yeah, I think we do a couple things. I think one, we live in a world where we want to understand leadership. We talk about winning all the time. And I try to make the argument, and I think my father lived a life like this, where you can win and be a good guy. And, I think that there's a lot of people that show themselves as winners, but don't necessarily care about the people that they're involved with, don't demonstrate the compassion, the understanding. I think it's harder to win and treat people well than it is to just win. And that's why I'm proud of my father. There's a lot of history of the NFL in there and history of the Steelers. So if you're intrigued by sports and the business of sports, I think you get a better understanding. And then, as I said at the beginning, the interviews are great. Hearing me, I hope folks don't mind listening to me read the book, but really these interviews. Franco's no longer with us. Rocky talks about what it was like to return from Vietnam. Mel Blount talks about being on the campus of an HBCU in the middle of the civil rights era and coming to Pittsburgh right after that. Joe Green talks about, what a championship team looks like and how you build it from the ground up. So I think there's a lot of things that folks would really enjoy, and you hear that firsthand and you hear the intimacy of their stories in a way that I think it's fun and interesting.
That is awesome. And I love that you are the one voicing it, because you got to have that little bit of the Yinzer accent. You don't have a lot of it, but you got a little bit of it, just enough. Check it out. It's called A Different Way to Win. Dan Rooney's story from the Super Bowl to the Rooney Rule. Very, very cool book. I'm going to make sure all my Steelers friends know all about it. Jim, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. Really appreciate it.
Ross, it's great. I'm going to get you a copy for your wife. She can download it and listen to it on the way to work. But really appreciate everything you do, and thank you so much for having me on.
I'm still thinking about how awesome those West Shore guys were last week when they came back, Jack. I mean, man, I told you guys last week, but I texted my buddy and said, I don't know how you guys go about the hiring process or what the culture is, but thoroughly impressed by everybody I've dealt with at westshorehome.com/Ross, whether it was initially when we got the 2 new showers and the 1 shower bath upstairs, and then more recently with the 4 doors. Thoroughly impressed by these guys. And for them to do the things they do in a day is bananas. 1 day. Right now they got the 3 for free sales event through February 2nd. So that's free install, free upgrade, 0% free interest. Just visit westshorehome.com/Ross. That's westshorehome.com/Ross. If you've ever thought about new windows, doors, shower, or bathroom, westshorehome.com/Ross for that free estimate. All right, so before we get started, you need to know that playoff season's here. And the only thing better than game day predictions are the foods that come with them. Introducing Tums Fantasy Foodball Pool, brought to you by Tums, America's #1 antacid brand, and DraftKings. Each week leading up to the big game, turn football into food ball by building your best game day plate for a shot at winning a share of $40,000 in cash prizes. Inspired by game day bites and tailgate treats, join the Tums foodball action during this playoff season's most heartburn-inducing time. Visit DraftKings.com/TumsFoodball between January 6th and February 9th to enter for free and select your game day plate before the start of each playoff round. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See terms at DraftKings.com/TumsFootball. When you feel the heat of the game, don't let heartburn keep you on the sidelines. Try Tums Chewy Bites with a tasty outer shell and soft center for fast relief of heartburn, acid ingestion, and upset stomach. Check out Tums Gummy Bites, featuring a soft and easy-to-chew format for fast relief of occasional heartburn, acid indigestion, sour stomach, and upset stomach. Both available at Amazon, Target, and other major retailers nationwide. And for more heartburn relief fun, be sure to follow Tums at Tums Official on Instagram and TikTok. So you already know that Smirnoff is the official vodka partner of the NFL and Super Bowl 59 because I've been telling you all season. What I like about Smirnoff is that you can get the world's #1 vodka without breaking the bank. Very affordable. This feeling is what the folks at Smirnoff call Smirnoff Extraordinary. They actually partnered with Complex, letting fans get their hands on some amazing items, handpicked by celebrities, including NFL legend, Super Bowl champ Vernon Davis, for just $12.99, just like a bottle of Smirnoff. Head on over to SmirnoffDrops.com to check out upcoming drops and check out these Smirnoff Extraordinary items. Go quick, they're not going to last long. Please drink responsibly, by the way. Smirnoff number 21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Pricing is at the sole discretion of the retailer. May vary by state. Please not share with anyone under legal drinking age.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, Ross, the biggest news, the Bears, they make the move. They are hiring Lions offense coordinator Ben Johnson as their next head coach.
Absolutely gigantic and big enough. I'm making it my Labatt take, Jack. Presented by Labatt Blue Light, the pristine Canadian Pilsner. Enjoy your beers together so you can live life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. Number one, this shows that the Bears mean business and that they are willing to pay up for a top-notch coach. Number two, this makes the Lions worse, the best team in your division. Number three, it shows that Ben Johnson believes in Caleb Williams. He had other options. He would not have taken this job unless he thought he can get Caleb Williams to play at a very high level. And number four, we don't know if Ben Johnson will be a good head coach or not, but we darn sure know he's an excellent offensive coordinator. So the floor, the baseline, is knowing that you're putting Caleb Williams in the best position to succeed. That is huge. We'll see how it plays out, but this is as excited as Bears fans should be about a head coach hire in a long, long time.
Another big hiring, the Colts are bringing in Lou Anarumo as their defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I'm happy for Lou. I think he is a good defensive coordinator. Did an excellent job for years with the Bengals. I'm not exactly sure what happened this year in Cincy, but I do think that's a good hire by Shane Steichen as well as the Colts. I think he'll do a nice job there, giving some fresh blood and energy to Indy.
And the Broncos, they fire their special teams coordinator, Ben Kotwika.
This is like maybe my least favorite thing about the NFL. One of them, they have a top 5 special teams. By every metric, they're like top 5. When Rick Gosselin comes out with his numbers, I don't know if this is a personality clash or Sean Payton just thinks he can get Darren Rizzi. I really don't know. But moves like this always kind of leave a bad taste in my mouth. Other than that, huge Even Money podcast today. Steve and I got all of our bets last week. Might even throw it here on the Ross Tucker Football podcast feed. I think we're done here. Last thing I wanted to mention on today's show, you guys need to check out New Heights. I think most of you probably have heard of it, but it's Jason and Travis Kelsey's awesome weekly podcast. Actually got a chance to talk with both those guys on Saturday. They were both in Kansas City. It's really fun. They get awesome guests. I mean, just recently it's like Will Ferrell, LeBron James. Plus just hearing those guys talk as brothers that are funny that obviously are still having a lot of success both on the field for Travis and off the field for Jason. Listen and watch New Heights wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to skip the ads, catch new episodes early, and unlock access to exclusive episodes of the show, join Wondery Plus in the Wondery app, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com. You know I love love. You know I love telling people how you feel about them. There's no better way for Valentine's Day than myfrontpagestory.com. BackOfficeScheduler.com, HumanHeadNYC.com, Sporticulture, Pizza Boy Brewing.